Hello all, I hope you are well in these extraordinary times, and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena where we're hosting you today. Joining me today is a bit of a legend in the fintech space and one of my favorite people on LinkedIn. Jay, how are you doing today? Jay, how's Canada?
Canada is awesome. Very hot today.
When you say very hot, do you mean, it's what, 1 inch of snow? Is that hot by Canadian standards?
You go high enough in the mountains, you'll find some snow, but it's 31 or 32 degrees Celsius. It's super hot today.
Wowza.
Yeah, it's great.
And you're I know you're on Central Time, but is it Calgary?
I'm in Calgary, yeah, an hour from the Rocky Mountains in Banff.
Oh, excellent. We're over here in Kent. Well, today we're going to be talking a little bit about social capital, which I know is a subject quite close to your heart. One of the things that this pandemic has, and the knock-on effects, has really brought up is I find myself communicating with people literally all over the world that I never would have had the opportunity to via LinkedIn. I've had some wonderful people that I've met through in Kenya and Brazil and Australia and New Zealand. I've even been speaking to someone in Sao Tome and Principe, which I never would have done before. But just to kind of sort of start off with, what is social capital? How would you kind of define exactly what we're dealing with?
Well, social capital is actually a concept that preceded social media and digital networks and all that. But it's basically, I guess, the goodwill that you accrue through engaging with people in a positive way, right? And people are familiar with political capital, that there's certain, things you accumulate over time, the ability to ask for something from somebody in a political setting. Social capital is not that different. It's very intangible, hard to put your finger on, hard to quantify, and but it becomes a very important part of any relationship building activity. And I like to say, I have this Venn diagram that I use in slide presentations, and it has 3 kinds of capital that are essential to drive return in your business. One is financial capital, and we know what that is, generally speaking, investments in your business. The second is human capital, which is investment in people and knowledge and their skills. And the third is social capital, which are the relationships that you have with a network of people that really drives your business and drives return in your business.
So we've been looking. A lot of my team have been quite obsessed with Tesla recently. That's almost a perfect example because the financials kind of doesn't justify the stock price yet. Human resources or human capital is slightly different, but the social capital, what this can do, almost the brand association with it is really driving the market quite strongly there.
It's a huge factor, and I would argue that when you decide you want to engage in digital social networks, that the thing that should be motivating you, engagement is an important measurement, and you should be focusing on how much engagement you get. But engagement is an indicator on some level of the social capital that you're earning. And you've probably had a similar experience to mine. You meet people online, you get to know them, you build relationships with them, and you accumulate a kind of social capital that allows you to ask for favors, to ask for introductions to other people, to ask them to do things for you or with you or part of an event you might be involved in. And that social capital can be translated into concrete activities, business referrals, all those kinds of things. But I don't think people really fully appreciate what you need to do to build it. That over time, you really need to be working towards building social capital in order to have success online, I believe.
I think with this, there's 2 main factors. There's obviously social capital for individuals, but then exactly the same for brands and companies as a whole. Looking at the on the individual side, what are some of the things that you should be doing really to build your social capital, and what are some of the instantaneous advantages that come with that?
Yeah, the first thing to think about is it's a long-term activity. It's not you don't go out and build social capital in 30 days, right? That typically doesn't not the way it works. So, but people talk sometimes about social selling online, which is very much not selling at all. It's more of a way of you're paying attention to people, you're nurturing the relationships, right? So I like to try to frame your activities online is stop thinking about social networking as a sales pipeline or a sales funnel, right? In a sales funnel, you start with a really, big, wide top of the funnel where you dump all kinds of folks in there that might be qualified, and then you qualify them. And as you qualify them and they drop down the funnel towards, the sale point at the end, you start ignoring them. The folks that aren't qualified, you don't spend energy on, right? That's what a sales funnel focuses you on doing. But what I would argue is that in order to build social capital online, you should be thinking more of building an audience that is way bigger than just people who might be qualified to buy your product or service today. Think more about, how do I get more people in my broader network? How do I get more weak ties in my social network? Not just people I know really well, but people I know a little bit, and use those relationships to my advantage. And so you're trying to grow a bigger group of people, because those people have value to you as well. They can recommend you. If they have a good opinion of you, they will refer you to people who are actually well qualified to buy the services or products that you're selling. So that's sort of a prelude to answering the question, which is everything you want to do in social networking to build social capital is really about driving relationships. It's paying attention to people, engaging in their conversations, things they want to talk about, not just pushing your message on them, like as a marketing sort of mentality has. I want to make sure my message gets out. Oh, you want to focus on what people talk, what are they talking about? What do they want to talk about? What's important to them? And I think when you do that, you position yourself to, you accumulate social capital by doing that, and you earn the opportunity to, at some point in the future, pitch them in a friendly setting, in an open, accepting setting.
Absolutely. I am. Well, it would have been 2016. I was at the Innovate Finance Global Summit, and I was speaking to one of the people who was basically serving drinks, and they were telling me about their fintech idea. I was like, "This is great! Get on camera!" 2 years later, they raised, I think it was about 10 million in their Series A. But I love that they were like, "Look, I haven't been able to get a ticket to this event, but I'm going to go in anyway." And they were there and they were networking, and it was phenomenal. But I also feel quite, not smug, but I was able to get some great content, like one of the first interviews with them. But I wasn't doing that thinking, "Oh, this person." I did it because it seemed like, to be honest, it seemed like a fun thing to do. I think there's that element as well of, when it comes to kind of building social capital, you've got to have fun with it. I mean, you've seen all the, or not so much this year, but like the hashtag lounge wankers, and you form like a little community around things like that.
No, it's I mean, it's social capital, right? It's very social. So I think you do have to have fun, like you said, and and I'm a firm believer people do business with people they know, like, and trust. So social capital is a great, building social capital in your social activities online should be built around sharing some personal ideas and insights. I mean, you want to be personal, and you want people to understand who you are and what you believe in, what makes you tick, how you think. But you also say some personal things will help people get that feeling from you and understand that. And once they get a sense of who you are, hopefully they'll like you. Because I think that kind of affinity is a big part of people being successful with their online activities. And then they ultimately will trust you. And it really is the key of that is people need to understand who you are and know you in a personal way to trust you. And that's probably one of the problems with brand marketing online is, brands they're just not lovable things generally. I mean, they may say clever, funny things. They may, push out messages that are appropriate, sympathetic with the times or something, but they're not the same as a human being who really has, you can empathize with, you can sympathize with a human being, and you can identify with them and connect with them. And that's why I'm a huge advocate that even brands need to be sending out, capable human beings that represent their organization to build social capital, because it's very hard for a brand. I mean, you can do it over time. You can build brand value and social capital, but relationships are often primarily done through people representing your company, people representing your customer so we're the folks who are having relationships, not the brands themselves. It's only through our relationships that the brands will have a quote unquote relationship. And but you're right. I mean, you have to be social, and you have to have some fun, and you have to, and that goes with anybody. I mean, you want to get to know, the top influencers in any industry online, figure out who they are, and literally, pay attention to them, befriend them, stop pitching them, and just get to know them, and help engage them, and have conversations online with them, and share their stuff. They're out there sharing stuff because they want reach. We'll help them get reach. It's actually a very easy it's an easy strategy when you get down to it, right? Just help people promote other people is one of the best ways to promote yourself.
Absolutely. Well, we've got to talk about influencers. So obviously on the B2C side, you have influencers for things like makeup and whatever it may be. Kids' toys. My son loves Ryan from Ryan Toy Review. On the B2B side, it's slightly different. So what role, especially now in this pandemic and subsequent lockdowns, what role do influencers have to play, if any at all? Because there's I did see a fantastic meme that was going around basically saying you can't put down your job as a fintech influencer, but yet people are still being influencers and actually having an effect. So what's kind of the role of fintech influencers?
Well, fintech influencers have what many people and businesses want, which is they have audience and reach, and they have credibility and trust with that audience. And if you're new, you may be a veteran in a business, but if you're new to a sector, if you're even new to being active online, people don't know about you except through your online activities, and there are geographical limitations and time limitations, and we have limitations on how many people we can come across. So influencers are a very important gateway to and a strategy to reach a larger audience of people that are interested in the sector that you're in the ecosystem that you're working in. And as a result, I think they're, and increasingly, they're the ones that are the arbiters of that traffic and the gatekeepers of that traffic. I mean, there are businesses, publications like yours, and many others that you can go to, and you can, you can buy advertising, you can place content. There you go. Content like yours, awesome glossy magazines from industry sectors, and you can do that in a traditional marketing way, but these days I find influencers don't just have an audience in a marketing sense, they have this credibility, which is hugely valuable. So building relationships with these folks is a way to it's a two-way benefit. You both get some additional exposure for your business and your technology and your innovative thinking, but you also tune into a very important discussion that's happening in your ecosystem about what's important and what's really innovative and what other people are doing and what's working and what's not working and what people think about things. So it really, I always, you start with a pitch typically to say, well, influencers are important for marketing. But what happens is when you're into it, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourself, you learn so many things from just listening to the conversation and engaging in the conversation. There's so much market intelligence that comes from from an influencer conversation that it's just the way we do business today. And but there are some differences we can talk about too, compared to B2C influencers.
Absolutely, and I believe one of the I actually believe it has a real actionable movement in getting stuff done. Case in point, before she became CEO of RBS, Alison Rose. I heard from the guys at 11FS that she had on her computer 3 of their stickers. All of it said, "Get shit done, get shit done, get shit done," on the side of her computer. And that was from being influenced by all these various people out there. One of the things I always find as well, interesting is the wrong word, but interesting around fintech influencers and the likes of people like yourself, of Jim Marous, of Brett King, people saying these kind of things, is, especially at conferences in the before times, is thought processes and quotes and those nuggets of wisdom that stick in the back of your head, you can't find those on Google. They're things that you can only find by being there, that you just can't randomly stumble across on Google, that then stick with you and think, do you know what, I can bring that into the business. That's kind of like one of the main sort of bits there. So how can influencers actually move from being, oh, that's useful in marketing, to actually helping pull the trigger, actually helping contracts get signed, helping businesses go, right, we have now actually been able to work with this particular bank because of this particular person there?
That's always the biggest challenge, right? Is to try and demonstrate what is the concrete return from these activities, because relationships with influencers can be, actioned and ultimately monetized in many ways, right? In a B2C context, there's a tendency to think, well, there's lots of micro influencers out there who are endorsing products, for families, for kids, toys, fashion items, all those kinds of things, foods. And so they're going to, you would reach out to them, there'd be some kind of a transaction associated with endorsement, right? And that, in a B2B setting, it's not quite as explicit. I mean, you certainly can, and businesses do go out and they hire influencers to speak at their events. They'll hire influencers to help promote their content or their white papers or some kind of campaign. But there's another level, I think, in B2B where you really you may do a few things to really get return and close a deal. I mean, you might work on trying to get somebody in your organization to rise to the level of build their own audience and rise to the level of some of the bigger names in the industry, and that might be very helpful in closing business deals. I think there's a few criteria you need to have it is a long-term thing. I know in my own business, I've had a variety of business of clients who I met and we had a relationship, and it wasn't clear they were going to become a client, and then they did become a client after, say, 2 years. And part of that closing, if you will, of that business opportunity was the fact that we stayed in touch, we stayed in contact, and even when we weren't talking directly, that person was aware of me and my expertise, my visibility, and I wasn't pushing and selling them directly at the time, but there was a way in which they said, when I'm ready to work with somebody who does this, I'm going to call Jay. And I think in any business, that's kind of the idea, that increasingly today, huge part of the business of the sales process is led by the buyer, and discovering information, figuring out, their use case, figuring out the challenges. They may reach out periodically to get answers. You may provide them answers without having contact. You may anticipate what their questions are going to be and help them answer those. There will come a time, if you're active on social, where somebody will knock on your door and say, hey, I watched this, listen to this podcast, watch this thing, read this thing, and I want to talk to you now. I'm ready. So that's how it typically happens.
We can't really talk about social capital and influencers without talking about influencer lists, because some of these, like there was the On Analytica ones where it shows how everyone's connected and the strength of the connections, and that's amazing. Other ones I've also looked at, I popped up as the number one influencer on an insurance list, wow. And I was like, no. I showed it to my wife and she laughed and said, it's in alphabetical order, you idiot. Which was very kind of, very, very, very nice to see. What's the use of B2B influencer lists? What's the best way of utilizing these tools? Because some we used to do one ourselves that was ruined by will.i.am breaking our algorithm. But equally, there's also some out there which are again, like the On Analytica ones, which are phenomenal. What's the best way of using this resource?
Well, that's a good question today in 2020. Lists of influencers have been around. I'd say really, I started doing lists 5 years ago, and I've probably come to the end of my list making days. I would always have all kinds of qualifiers about what lists should be used for and what they shouldn't be used for. But I think, if the first thing about any list is usually it's driven by an algorithm that's somehow counting things that people have done, how many times people like their tweets, the retweets, the reach, the audience, all these kinds of metrics that may point in some direction at engagement and real credibility with an audience, but often they're kind of false positives too, because there's lots of gaming of the systems. They're increasingly on Twitter. If anybody's paying attention, you see the most quote unquote influential people are often tagging 6, 8, 10 people in every tweet, and that's really just kind of a gaming of Twitter. Those people see it, they retweet it themselves, and
well, I've definitely done that a few times.
Yeah, we've all done it. Well, sometimes we don't feel good about ourselves, but I think the important thing to recognize is these influencer lists and influencers in general are really, to an extent, they're self-generated. They're self-initiated. The people who get on the list are there because they're active on a topic, and there's some metric that's being used to rank them. Now, the metrics you can debate, whether they're good or bad. Some lists are better than other lists. For sure, they do other analytics. And I think at the end of the day, though, I wouldn't take lists too literally. Oftentimes, the top of the lists, even across topics, if you notice, they'll have similar people on the top 10 or 20 because those people are active on a variety of topics, actively sharing. And the way I would treat a list in a really practical way is I would use it as a starting point for my own list, because at the end of the day, we all will choose who's going to be influential to us, who we think is strategically important to us, whether that's you as an individual, as a professional looking at your career, who really says things that ring true to you and that bring insight to you. That's a very subjective thing. So I would use any list as a starting point to say, I'm going to tune into these people because they're emerging as visible from this, morass of people and messaging. And, but I'm going to decide who of those folks in the top, at the tops of the lists, who I'm going to build on. And I'm going to listen and find probably lots of other people who don't make it to the list, but are maybe even more insightful to me personally. So to me, it's a starting point, and but it's a good starting point in that it gives you sort of a way to quickly get into a conversation that's happening that you should be part of, you should be listening to.
I love that. I'm definitely gonna steal that. That all these influencer lists, they're there so that you can basically build your own list, whether it be in your head or on paper or online, your own list of people. These are the kind of people that I want to be influenced by.
Yeah, I mean, it's really subjective, isn't it? Right? I mean, any kind of influence that we ever talk about, it's a subjective thing. There's lots of people, even on the top influencer, you can go and say, who are the top influencers in venture capital? Who are the top influencers in anything that's not a social media metric based thing? You still would look at that list and say, oh, that guy, Buffett's great from investing, and I'm tuning into Buffett. But someone else who makes that list, because in someone else's opinion, they're influential, you say, that guy's an idiot, I'm not listening to that person. They don't really speak to me, and I don't think they're that insightful. So everyone's always going to have a subjective view of influence. And the list is really just that place to start and decide who you really want to tune into. And it's a good place to start. Absolutely.
With that in mind, we've got to also talk a little bit around the potential negative elements of things like social capital and putting a number on someone's social score. We've got to talk about China, who are obviously doing that in quite a successful way. I just read a thing that said that they digitized the class system in many ways.
Yes.
What's your stance on that? And of course, how to walk that fine line between innovation and yes, digitizing and creating a digital social score, but at the same time, not living in 1984.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting, it's interesting that's where it kind of ends up in this conversation in your mind, because, when I talk about this stuff, it's not immediately apparent to me that the two are related, but I can see the connection. So let's start by saying, I think the world we live in today in the West, where we have rights, we have choices, about whether we want to engage in social networks. There's lots of people who are very influential, very powerful, very smart, and worthy of you listening to, who decide to not engage in social media. That's their choice. And then there's folks that, there's folks that have all those qualities and also engage in social media. And there's folks that don't have those great, virtuous qualities that are very active in social media, and you probably shouldn't be listening too closely to them. And it's hard sometimes to determine all those things. But I think the common element there is voluntary, right? We all decide if we're going to use this tool and this platform professionally, and how we can use it to our advantage professionally. And while we are being ranked, we're being ranked in a way that is for the most part a reflection of our voluntary public activities. And I think that's a huge, that choice and that right to withdraw from that and not participate if you don't want to, which is a legitimate choice for lots of people and for all kinds of reasons. I think that's one of the big differences between sort of the social engineering that's going on in China and with some of the tech. And I think that kind of social engineering, I think it's the possibility of it is certainly introduced by this technology that we're using to socialize and interact with each other, but it's not a necessary outcome of that, I think would be my argument. That I think there's a way to choose to have some of our relationships virtually through this environment and this platform and these platforms, and not necessarily evolve into some sort of social dystopian social engineering project, which is certainly, there are signs indicating that that's where things may be going in China.
Absolutely. I mean, that you've hit the absolute nail on the head there. It's a real cliche, but it's what you do with the technology. It could be absolute salvation, make the world amazing. Equally, if used in ways, I'm not saying that it is at the moment, but there is the opportunity for it to go down. Well, with that in mind, I'm obviously coming up to a wee bit of time now. What is your number one tip, advice, your number one tidbit for improving your social capital and helping improve and not only improving your own social capital, but understanding and utilizing other people's?
Yeah, I think the number one tip is get out there and get involved and see building social capital and engaging in relationship building and nurturing in an online setting as not just a campaign, and certainly not something you do temporarily, but try to find a way to do it on a daily basis as a regular part of your work. I still today cannot understand or imagine why some kind of social networking proficiency, the ability to have a productive relationship with a valuable contact online in various forms, is not increasingly not a requirement of any business leader in any setting. Because I just don't think we live in a world today where the social networks, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you spend your time, even TikTok potentially, is having a presence, being able to exchange and build relationships with people of value in your business is an important part in almost any role. And it's still something that's being overlooked. So I think getting the skill set up to be able to do that as a daily part of doing your job, no matter what your job is really the key. And the key to getting success in that is really just stop thinking about what you want to push on people and think about how to be helpful to them, how to be useful to them, and you will get from that a huge openness to talk about what you want to talk about when they're ready. I mean, that just is the way people are often. Don't interrupt me, and that whole interruption marketing is not working. So be there, engage with people, build a community, and be part of that community. And a time will come where everybody who's interested they'll ask you for a pitch. Tell me what you do. How can I help you? People say that all the time. That's the way business goes. That's the way business happens in the modern world, and it's not as complicated as it seems sometimes.
100%. Well, Jay, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. What is the best way to reach out to yourself?
Well, I am on social networks, And you can Google Jay Palter. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn are two active places I am. And but I'm also on Facebook and Instagram more personally. So come find me. And certainly if you're watching this and you see it, come to LinkedIn, make a connection request. Make sure you let me know that you saw this particular program, this particular recording, because let me know. I look forward to making anybody's acquaintance and getting to know people.
Absolutely. And you got some great posts on LinkedIn, like there was obviously, should you accept LinkedIn requests from strangers? There's some great bits on there.
Yeah, so don't be a stranger. That's the key. If you're going to connect, tell me where, why, how, and I'm open, and I'll do the same with you.
Awesome, cool. Thanks very much, then, Jay.
Thank you, Ali. It's been great.